Sure.
Kimberly, I think most of us have blind spots. I think the biggest challenge is, can we acknowledge them? Become aware and acknowledge. Like, because we have them, whether it's one or three or five or whatnot. But the key for us in our careers, right, is acknowledging them and then knowing how to deal with some of them. And some we don't need to deal with as much, but it's really helpful to deal with some of the bigger and more important ones. And that's really key. Have you worked with a lot of people that you would say, you don't need to be specific, but generally speaking, with a lot of people in your career that you feel didn't address blind spots they had?
Oh, definitely. It's something that we don't want to address. A blind spot is a perceived weakness in our mind. So we tend not to want to focus in the area of our weaknesses. We like to focus on our strengths. I can speak for me that I had one called out to me probably about 5, 6 years ago when I was working. We were in, or probably longer, we were in one of those team building exercises where sitting around the table and we were supposed to acknowledge, Scott, this is your strength, this is your weakness. And my boss was at my table and she looked at me and she said, Kimberly, your strength, your tunnel vision, that's a strength. I was like, well, thank you. And she said, your weakness is tunnel vision. And I was like, thank you. But when I started to think about that, it's that singular perspective of how I look at things, that I look at every situation or every person through that same lens. And I did see what she was talking about. At that time, my role was corporate development, business development. So really great to have tunnel vision for strategic outreach, strategic growth, partnering, finding the money. I was good at that. That was great. Step back and then how I interacted on other areas, I still had that same singular view of my opinion, and not only in work, but in personal. And I think at one point somebody said I was like a dog with a bone. And I realized that probably wasn't the image I wanted. What about you? Do you have a blind spot or two?
No, thanks for sharing. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know if mine fits the letter of the law or definition perfectly, but it leads to blind spots. I've always been somebody, my personality is that I generally make an assumption that other people at work, colleagues I've worked with, teammates, partners, see things the same way I do. Like for some reason, I've had this tendency over a good part of my career to like something comes out or comes up, we talk about it, we start to get things moving on it. And I just have this assumption, like everybody views it the same way I do. And I learned that that's not always the case, obviously. And what happens is sometimes it's not a big deal at all, but other times you'll get into whatever it is you're working on and you'll realize, oh, wait a minute, they don't see this the way I do, or vice versa, I don't see it the way they do. And so subsequently there's a disconnect. So that's kind of like a blind spot for me. The way I look at it is when I assume or presume and make an assumption, and next thing you know, I realize that there's a disconnect, and I don't realize it until it's either too late or it's staring us all in the face instead of being out ahead of it.
Yeah. Now, in a way, it's related to my line of thinking. It's not tunnel vision, but it's looking through your own lens and making assumptions. And I'm very thankful that she pointed that out to me, because I probably would have continued forward without that knowledge. And once I knew that, then I tried to figure out ways to overcome it. And, for me, it was a lot more about listening first instead of always putting my view or my opinion out there. So I did try to be a better listener and ask better questions, of my team and my family, of the people around me. So I try to hold my tongue first, ask questions, listen, and make the realization that sometimes not everybody sees things the same way I do.
Yeah, and it's really helpful to go, and I think we're both, as I've gotten to know you more and more, I know I'm very empathetic, and I'm a very curious person who loves to ask a lot of questions, and I think it's just shortchanged me a little bit in my career, my tendency to be presumptuous. Whereas if I don't have an opportunity to spend a lot of time with somebody and get feedback from them or their viewpoint, I'll just assume that they're looking at it the same way that I do. And yeah, I think there's some synergy in what we're talking about, your tunnel vision, my assumption making. And so what can we share with people, that helps? Those are blind spots, so to speak, for you and I, and it's different for everybody. Others may have a similar blind spot, but, for me, I'll kick it off. One of the things that we need to do regularly, and this is, to me, speaking of being presumptuous, an obvious one, is we need to ask for feedback regularly. And not just from our bosses or management. I think it's really important to ask for feedback from peers and people we work with. What do you think?
No, I agree. I hear and do a lot asking a trusted few. And so it's in your circle, professionally and personally. I also kind of throw in the not trusted one or two, because I want the brutal honesty, because it helps me look at things a little bit differently. Another way to think about it is, for those who may not think they have a blind spot, start focusing on your strength and talking about your strength. So for, my example, my strength was tunnel vision. But if you talk about that and talk about what it means in terms of work, a really good question then to ask that person is, so what's it like to be across the table from me all the time? And that's a way then to get some of that different viewpoint out. And it's in a little safer environment, because I'm starting with acknowledging that I do have a strength. You're acknowledging that I have a strength. And we build a little bit of rapport. And then it's a little easier for me to kind of pull that Band-Aid off just a little on the bad part of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a great piece of advice. It's the stuff we need to do that we tend to avoid, right? Because, we want to, especially at work. And this is a whole other conversation, and we won't go down this rabbit hole for this discussion. But, at work, we all like to project, I got this, I know it, I'm good, I'm strong. You alluded to this in the beginning. So therefore, that mindset and mentality prevents us from looking for our blind spots in a good way. We may think about them a little bit on our own. What can I get better at? But we really, to do it right, we need to ask those around us. And I heard a great tip one time from Lewis Howes, who said, and I think I've seen other people do this, but I just remember him always saying this, is one thing he did early on, and he does this every so often when he started his business as a lifestyle entrepreneur, is he sat down close family and friends. And he said, tell me, what am I good at? What am I not good at? What are my strengths? What are my blind spots? And people who had known him a long time. And he said, this is safe. I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to get mad at you. Tell me everything you can about me. And I think having conversations like that is really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And that aligns with talking to a trusted few, because it allows those that you are comfortable with and value their opinion or advice to speak openly and freely. It would be very difficult for me if I were still in the corporate world in a leadership role and go to one of my supervisees and say, what don't you like about me? That's not going to be the good starting point for a conversation. Great advice.
Yeah. So for our last moment or so, I think we've given a couple of good suggestions around, what we should do to be more aware of our blind spots. And how about leaving with a mindset along the lines of, let's shift the way we look at these to when we embrace our blind spots, when we find them out, are aware of them and embrace them, it actually can help our career a lot. What's one way you think being more aware of your blind spots is going to help you in your business?
I really like where you were going with that, with the mindset, because when we focus only on our strengths, it becomes, habit. It's subconscious. We can just do it. We don't think about it. But when you take that moment to step back and think about an area of weakness, which I would consider my blind spot, the negative part of it, an area of weakness, I really have to stop and think. And it's in those moments where true growth is happening. So if I'm growing in my learning, growing in my development of myself, that makes me better in my work. And from the perspective of a coach, it helps me to share with clients that, I've had these same experiences and struggles, and help them go through the process.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially as a coach, right? And we're guiding you as a leadership coach, me as a career coach, we're guiding people through often transformational change, either in themselves or in their business and career. And that awareness and enlightenment around all things around us is so critical. really helps out. Kimberly, great talk as always. I appreciate it. Good stuff. Thanks for the tips.
Yeah, good. And I'm going to hold you to the continuing conversation that you alluded to.
Oh yeah, we'll have to visit. Let's make note of that one. More to come. Thanks.
Bye, Scott.
Bye.